Savvy Central Radio, drawing out the best from our guest, with your host, Christina Nitchman.
Everybody's home is a place for like-minded people who love their pets and want fashionable, quality home furnishings for them. Whether looking to add a little flair to your apartment or redesign a room in your home, everything in their collection is chosen for your pet's comfort and your style. Not only will you add more love and style to your home, you will help feed an animal caught in the crossfire of domestic violence through their Everybody's Pet Project initiative. Find out more by visiting everybody'shome.com or call 212-614-3239. This is your host, Christina Nitchman. Each week, Savvy runs weekly broadcasts providing entrepreneurs and successful individuals a platform to express their dreams, hopes, lessons learned, expertise, and wisdom with the world. Our guest today is Michael Ditchfield, humanitarian, best-selling author, sought-after speaker, entrepreneur, and former professional athlete. Michael's committed to addressing the humanitarian plight of developing countries. Ditchfield speaks widely on promoting empowerment while inspiring change in different cultures and individuals. Michael Ditchfield joins us today to share details on his new book, Life's Too Short for Leftovers, 9 Lessons from a Third World Kitchen, and what we can all do to make the world a better place using our own gifts and talents we already possess. Find out more about Michael and his new book at michaelditchfield, DITCHFIELD.com. Hi, Michael. Welcome to Savvy Central Radio. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. No complaints. Taking nourishment.
Well, I'm very grateful to have you out here today at Savvy Central Radio. You have an inspiring journey that has led you to do humanitarian work around the globe, to be a speaker, an entrepreneur, best-selling author, and you have a new book that's come out called Life's Too Short for Leftovers, 9 Lessons from a Third World Kitchen. So how did this all come about for you? Because you were originally an athlete.
Well, I came from England from a very blessed background, and I wanted to make the venture over to the United States just to pursue my education at Penn State University and also to pursue professional sports. So I've been a professional athlete in England, then came over, played American football, and then got into coaching. And everything started to appear that something was missing in my life. And I wanted to give back, and it's the whole adage of doing something for someone else. So I was very blessed in Denver to run into Noel Cunningham, who I feature in my book, and he was my mentor, my inspiration, and my lighthouse. He was a constant. I always could count on him, and hopefully other people can count on me. So he just got me involved in Africa. I mean, destinations are everywhere, whether it's, Asia, China, Africa. We gravitate towards things that are very meaningful in our lives. So I was directed towards Africa, and that was the first stepping stone of my humanitarian journey.
And through that journey, what would you say has propelled you forward? Because I'm sure there were some difficult times along this journey. It's a very different background than being an athlete. What were your greatest moments? What were your most difficult moments?
Well, I've the greatest moments is by using soccer. That was a universal language of peace. So by being able to utilize what I was good at, I could certainly make a stand for something. And so by utilizing soccer in the countries that I've been to, Rwanda, Sudan, Ethiopia, and Ghana, it gave me that stepping stone just to keep the thread of a uniform, into a blanket of peace that we could create utilizing sports, and in my case soccer, to work with them and give them some kind of a hope. So a lot of the journey that's been positive has been through utilizing soccer. Some of the, obviously, the down times was just seeing exactly how poor that continent is. So when you look at, they didn't ask to be born poor. We could have fallen out of a womb on the other side of the world, and but by the good grace of God, a lot of them not. But they didn't ask to be born poor. But to see their faces after we have taken soccer into their villages, and to see the smiles on their faces and to see the unspoken word of thank you has given me, more joy. Coming back to looking at the negatives of, I believe I met the devil. I believe I shook hands with the devil. I've spent time with the devil, and that's in the people there that have been affected, and especially the women there that have, dealt with rape, and a lot of the men in Rwanda who've had their Achilles slashed and they're limping around. So you see visually through the eyes just exactly, the trauma that is there.
And through it all, has there been any times where you thought, hey, I'm just not cut out for this, and want to just cut out, or what kept you forward on the road to doing what you were doing?
Well, I think you run into watersheds in your life, and the greatest watershed that I had was we went over to Ethiopia, and HD Network did a documentary on our whole voyage over there called the Green Famine. And we showed that back in Denver, the documentary, when it was released. And there were 600 people in the auditorium. The governors and mayors were there, and there was not a dry eye in the place. And then 2 weeks later, I was in a parking garage on a rainy December evening, driving down to the parking lot attendant. And he was from Ethiopia. I had my ticket, and he looked at me and he said, you were in that movie, weren't you? And I said, yes. And then he said something to me I will never hear again in my life, and very few people do hear. He said, thank you for saving my people. And when you hear that, it is not a fleeting moment. It is not temporary. It drives you to make the next step. And it was the same in Rwanda, where we were doing a soccer clinic in Kigali. The headmaster tapped me on the shoulder and said, Michael, this is the same field where 200 children were macheted to death. Now we have laughter. Now we have smiles. So these are the things that keep you going and going. And the last was writing the book, where, the book signing, 2 former governors, Speaker of the House, and they came up afterwards and said, your journey is not complete. This book is not the end. You've got to continue with this path, which I am doing.
Yeah. And what I'm really getting from your story, and I love, is that you're an athlete, and your biggest gift is sports and soccer. But what's interesting is people think, well, what could I possibly give to people in a third world country if I can only draw, if I can only dance, or if I'm only an athlete? And here you're showing them that it doesn't matter what your gifts or talents are, that you can add value to any part of the world that's suffering.
Yes, exactly. Just like in Rwanda, we have the Sports and Culture for Peace Foundation. And I talk about Jean-Paul Saputra, who was one of the greatest African musicians who at one point, he had to turn his back on his country because all of a sudden his family were murdered during the genocide. And he found out that it was his neighbor, Vincent, that killed his father. And he returned to forgive him. And he also had a dream that he would win the Kora, which is the African Grammy. His dream came true. He forgave those people that were involved in the massacre, and he went on to win the Grammy. And he's given me the rights to his song, Cherish the Children, to use in any documentary or anything that I want. And so you see here the power of music, because he's continued with 15 orphans from the genocide, traveling the world with Vincent. And all they're doing is putting music out there so you can have music therapy, just like you can have art therapy. All I wanted to do was take it across the oceans and utilize my forte, my specialty, to those children.
And has it made a major impact in your life?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I'm a different individual now. It's not that you come back and you indoctrinate. And just like I've said from the book, I'm not talking to people about going to Africa. What I'm trying to do is put the word out there of find your old calling. Like I said, if you've lost a sister to breast cancer, you work with that cause. If you've lost a child to leukemia, you work with that cause. If you love animals, you work with your local animal shelter. All it is, it's finding what is inside of you, harnessing it, and taking it to that next level. Sometimes we are blind to the fact that we can do something. We have to. It's our moral obligation to Africa, nothing more. Because some people say, why don't you do more things in America? I see wonderful people doing great things and accomplishing a lot. My calling is the moral obligation. We will never, ever cure poverty, but we can make the lives of the poor better. That's my dream. That's my goal. That's my passion.
Yeah. And Michael, what's interesting there is that for the people that asked you, well, why don't you do it in your own country or in the United States? The thing is, as you just mentioned, whatever your cause and your passion is, there'll be someone else within the United States who will maybe want to help the poor here or get better drinking water in, for the Indian reservations or whatever their cause might be. Just focus on in your heart and what is your heart drawing you to and pulling you to, and go with that.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I spend time working with local organizations. But when my calling came from my mentor, I realized that, poor people die not only because of the world's indifference to poverty, but because of the ineffective efforts of those who do care. We have to make sure that when we make a commitment and we are impeccable to our word, that we either fulfill that moral obligation in Africa or we raise money to send it over there. We deal with Rotarians, we deal with the people, but at the end of the day, we have to make sure that our voice is heard, that the malaria nets are actually got to the locations. So it's a little harder to deal with Africa than it is to deal with things here. But, life's not about simple things. We have to, make it a little tough on ourselves because I think we grow a little bit quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that you mentioned be impeccable to your word and whatever your goals are. I think I've heard in the past, many people will have a goal or something they want to reach for and they'll get maybe really, really close to reaching it and then just give up because it seems too hard. Right. And you're just probably just one little step to reaching it. And then you just called it quits.
Yeah, exactly. You see that a lot. When you're doing something over here, usually someone else will pick up the slack. Over there, they don't have anybody else to pick up the slack. We're very quick. There's two forms of kind of relief where everybody's there for the quick relief, but no one stays for the development. The relief you will see when you have a tragedy, whether it's, an act of nature, such as the tsunami that you see, or whether it's man's inhumanity to man. At the end of the day, we're left managing a moment of truth. And everybody loves to be there for the relief. When it was Haiti, everybody was there. It was in the news. And then all of a sudden, we lost sight of that until we had the anniversary. So, that humanitarian aid, that's like, it's right there very quickly. And then we have the charity-based aid where we stay a little bit, but we have to stay the course, and that's in the development. And once we've developed, we built the infrastructure, they want us to leave. It's the hand up, not a handout mentality. And I found that in the countries, certainly in Rwanda and Ethiopia, our Project Mercy in Ethiopia, they want to be shown how to do something, and then they want us to step back. And they want to do it themselves because aid is killing Africa. The monies that go there, it's killing. We have to deal because the poor are a great measuring stick of what they want, not what we feel they need.
And I really like that you mentioned that because it's not a hand out, it's a hand up, really giving them the tools to build their own infrastructure and their own what their needs are and build it to their specifications and their needs. And this recalls for me, Michael, many years ago, I had worked with families who had children who had autism, and we were so focused in the organization I belonged to helping children with autism. And one parent said to us, well, what happens when our children become adults? There's absolutely no program for them as adults. At that moment in time. And I thought that was interesting. We weren't focused on what's going to happen later.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's a little bit of the reverse over in Africa, because if you take education, because there is a lack of education, for the first 7 years, these children don't go to school. So what happens during those times? So if we can get people, especially girls, educated early enough, then hopefully they will carry that on into their adult lives. And the females they're going to carry the beacon. If you look at Rwanda, 64% of the lower parliament are women. That is the empowering force of Africa. HIV will decrease tremendously because of the education of these girls at a young age and the women at a later age so they can continue. At Project Mercy, we have 98% graduation rate. And that is a staggering amount. Again, it's that one stepping stone, that one oasis, the most holistic thing that I've ever been around anywhere in the world. But you can duplicate that. Ray Kroc said when he started McDonald's, a lot of $1 for $1 burgers becomes a lot of $1. So that power of duplication is how can we duplicate such a holistic program and spread it not only through Africa, but through the rest of the world?
Absolutely. And really, education is suffering even here in the United States. So it would be awesome if we could bring system that works all around the world and set it up. So what do you most hope that people will gain from picking up your book and reading Life Too Short for Leftovers?
I think that they'll realize that yesterday is over. We can learn from yesterday. We don't have to stay stagnant, but learning from the past can help us step forward. And all the lessons that I put in there are lessons that we encounter here. But some of the poorest people in Africa are the happiest people in Africa. So what is it that makes them happy? And again, there's no such word as always, and there's no such word as never. So we do have those tragedies that we've seen in Darfur. But even then, they pull together as a village. So when I talk about love, I talk about forgiveness. We talk about exceeding your expectations in life, dealing with anger, just saying thank you, which if you look across the tribes, especially the Dinka tribe in Sudan, they tend to look at a lot of little things and do 1% better in all of them, rather than taking one thing and doing 100%. So I just come back with the ideas and what I've learned from them. If you look at forgiveness and the Rwandan genocide, they forgive the unforgivable. So if they can forgive the unforgivable, we can forgive people here for what are usually emotional and romantic problems. So all these things are on a really a dramatic level over there. So if we water them down, we can bring them over here and just utilize those as thought-provoking instruments in our day-to-day lives. And I've always said, when at the end of the day, look in the mirror and ask yourself one question. How many times have I lied to myself today? And you look and say, well, I was going to go to the gym after I had my Starbucks, but you didn't. Now, that is a very watered down. But at the end of the day, if you can say, I've never lied to myself once, then I think that carries over to the other people in your life. And that is a major, major threshold that you can break through, because I think, mediocrity, we accept mediocrity. We don't like success. We don't like failure. When I talk about mediocrity, I talk about it in Africa as being the middle class. You have to create a middle class in Africa because you have the rich and you have the poor. There's no in between. And a middle class will keep a country honest, whether it's here or in Africa.
I really like that you mentioned about, can you say in one day's time, have you been completely honest with yourself in all things? And then I would add to that if you do come to the realization as you ask that question, hey, I didn't follow through on my promises to myself. All right, don't beat yourself up. Guilt and shame are not going to be helpful to you, but notice it and make a resolve to do better the next day.
Right, exactly. On some things, we should beat ourselves up. We really should. And I mean, it's just a fact of just dealing with ourselves and saying, I am not going to accept that. And I will take myself to that next level. And then the following day, whatever you didn't do and you've done that day, it all comes together. So it's a little piece of a jigsaw puzzle that we keep building every single day.
And explain to me, you mentioned mediocrity. I'm a little curious about that because you had mentioned that you just have the super poor and the super rich in Africa and nothing in between. Would getting rid of mediocrity and bringing standards up get rid of and bring more middle class into Africa?
Well, when I talk about creating a middle class, if you had to put it in a very generic term, a lot of the wars that you see in Sudan, if you look at northern Sudan, you have a Muslim race. In the south, you have Christian. The oil's in the south, there's no oil in the north. And on western Sudan, you have Darfur, which are black Muslims. that became a war over land and water. If you give a family within a tribal region a certain amount of land, they create their own crops. They can start to flourish. One of the easiest ways to start on a middle class is to deal with giving them something that they own. Not just, internally they own a sense of pride, but they have to live. So that survival can become day to day by giving them a plot of land so they can start to flourish. Then you start dealing with the infrastructures so that they can trade between villages. Then you have this free market system. And then all of a sudden you have created a middle class with middle class values, because they want to get out of poverty as much as they can, but they will still remain poor. We have to start somewhere.
And that's interesting you mentioned that, Michael. I had heard someone just say to me this week that there's a number of cities within the United States who have gone bankrupt, and all the stores are closed up and houses in foreclosure, and the growing rate of the poverty and poor. And someone had just made the idea to me the other day that, hey, if we had opened up some of those stores and allowed store owners to pay much less than the going rate just to get the stores up and going, just to get families into houses for a rate that they could afford, would then build the economy back up. And so I'm guessing from what you're saying there, it's the same deal.
Absolutely. And you make a great point. If we brought the poor from Africa over here and put them into a situation, they would feel they've struck the lottery. Because sometimes we believe that we're on the bottom rung of the ladder, whether it's day-to-day activities or, the poverty that we've seen in this country. So that bottom rung of the ladder is one thing. We just don't realize that there are two ladders below us. And those ladders can be felt and seen in the third world or the developing world, as we tend to, imply it towards. So it's all relative. It's what we can learn, though, from when we can learn from the poorest of the poor and how that can enhance our life. We can go back and show them that, yes, we do care. We do believe in that moral obligation. We're a lighthouse that they can count on. We're not a weather vane that's very wishy-washy, that just points in the direction where the wind's coming from. Something that you can't rely on. But a lighthouse is something that we can, and hopefully that the third world will be able to. And it's not to run their lives. We can't go in there and change their culture. It's a case of showing them things that will enhance their lives so that they can become better people in their own right.
Yeah. And Michael, through all of your journeys, what would you say has been your most valuable lesson that you've learned through all of this?
The most value is patience. Even grass turns to milk given time. And I tried to rush things through, but it's like on African time, you'll see when you're trying to get a train or catch a plane. Everything is on African time. And what I had to do, because I thought, I can go in and change what I feel is the problem. But it's a case of just sitting down, going in there, educating through the eyes, not the ears, because we hear so much. But when you can sit down there and watch it, just like the movie Hotel Rwanda, I actually went to that same hotel and I sat by the swimming pool where a lot of those the Tutsis were kept there to hide. And I looked in there and say, I can make an impact. I just got to make sure that it's what they need, not what I feel I want them to need. So it's the understanding and learning from them, because I think, as I mentioned, the poor people are a measuring stick. That is what your guide is. And that's the greatest lesson that I've learned.
Wow. And when you say the poor are the measuring stick for everything else, from that, what would you surmise is one of the greatest dilemmas facing the entire planet at this moment?